I'm zooming you in super close because today I'm giving you an in-depth beginner makeup tutorial. By the way, I'm KJ Miller. I'm a founder, lecturer, and content creator. I love talking all about things like beauty, business, and pop culture. If you like any of that, be sure to subscribe. Now let's get into this tutorial. The reason I decided to go ahead and do a beginner-friendly makeup in-depth tutorial is because a lot of my friends and family gifted themselves Mented this holiday season, particularly during our Black Friday sale, and then texted me saying, I bought a bunch of stuff, how do I use it? So this video really is for them, but hopefully it's helpful for some of you as well. Up next, I'm going to be applying primer. I get a lot of questions about what is primer for. So the purpose of primer really is to prep for makeup, prep the skin for makeup and make sure that your makeup applies more smoothly, more evenly, and also stays on longer. That's the purpose of primer, regardless of what type of primer it is, whether it is a hydrating primer, an illuminating primer, a mattifying and blurring primer like Mented's, whatever type of primer it is, at the end of the day, all of them are trying to prep your skin so that your makeup applies more evenly and stays on longer. Now, up next, we have foundation. I, of course, am using Mented Skin by Mented in the shade M40. Now, the purpose of foundation is to even out your complexion. The reality is almost no one has one complexion on their face, and that's especially true if you are a person of color. If you already have a really even skin tone and you feel like you don't want or need foundation, that's fine. Or if you feel like, you know what, it just adds more time to my routine and I'd rather just like work on my cheeks, lips, and eyes and get out the door, that's okay too. But for a lot of us, we like to start the makeup routine with a more even complexion, and that's where foundation is gonna come in. Now, I love our foundation. You can see this is my kind of like summer shade M40. I wear it year round though, so in the winter when I'm pale, like I am right now, it can look a little bit darker. I personally don't mind it because I'm gonna go back in with a lighter concealer, but you might wanna have both a summer shade and a winter shade. But I love a stick foundation because it's so easy to apply. So once your foundation is applied, I personally love to use little circle strokes like this all over to buff it in. The other thing that I do see makeup artists do, and I personally think this just takes longer, so I don't do, is little, kind of patting motions. For me, the circles work and it's faster. So that's how I apply. And you're gonna wanna use a brush like the Mented foundation brush. It's got a little bit of density to it, so it can really move the product around and blend it in. Up next is one of my favorite steps, which is concealer. Now, you wanna get a concealer that is a few shades lighter than your foundation because the purpose of this concealer really is to add some brightness to your under eye area. How much you apply is up to you. Right now, the trend is to go very minimal. I see a lot of girls who just put a little bit here and a little bit there. That's not me. I love concealer. So I'm coming down the side of my nose and fully under the eye. The one thing I do recommend is letting your concealer sit for a little bit before you blend it out. So I like to bring it not just under the eyes, but also a little bit down the nose and in the center of my forehead. And then I do not immediately blend. I let that sit for a couple of minutes. And the reason you do that is because as it sets, it actually thickens a bit, which means it's going to give you even fuller coverage. All right, now that that has set, now that the concealer has had a chance to sit for a little bit, I'm gonna go in with my sponge to blend it out. If you are using a sponge, and this is the Mented Pillow Puff, I think it's an amazing sponge. Important to note, you need to wet it, but then wring out all the water. I actually cover it up with a paper towel while I'm wringing it out on the sink because you don't want wet, you just want soft. And then you're just gonna lightly, very lightly tap in order to blend. You don't, because it's so soft, it's gonna kind of like bounce off the skin as you're tapping it in. Okay, so now it is time to set. And because this is a beginner tutorial, I'm gonna use the same shade of setting powder for my whole face, both under eye and the whole face. However, I will often use a lighter shade for under my eyes and a deeper shade for the rest, but you can absolutely use one shade. So this is Mented Skin Silk Setting Powder in the shade Medium Deep. It is our top selling shade. We sell a lot of it. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do this. Step one for my old school girlies, my OG girlies, is to bake, okay? So I've pulled some powder into the top here of the container. I'm gonna pick it up with a dry sponge, or if you have like a little puff, you can use a puff. And then I'm going to get nice and close, dust that all in to my under eye area. And after I do that, I'm gonna let it sit. So it's really, really, really gonna set. Another option, if you're not into baking, you don't want it to be so bright and set, you know, to perfection for the gods, is you can take a nice kind of fluffier sort of brush, dip it into your product, dip off the excess, and just kind of pat that in lightly. And then for the rest of your face, you're gonna take a brush like this, a bit fluffier. This is a stippling brush. It's the Mented loose powder brush. You're gonna tap it in, tap off the excess, and then you're actually just gonna press that in. I actually picked up a little bit too much. Press it in to the rest of your skin. And once you've pressed, then you can kind of swirl it off. So now we get to cheeks. I like to start with bronzer. You're gonna pick up your bronzer with a brush that's not too dense, but you don't want it so fluffy that the product goes every which way. I like a lot of bronzer. In terms of placement, you're really aiming for this part of the cheek. Okay, so you're gonna tap that on. Do you see? And then after I tap, I like to swirl. The purpose of bronzer is to add warmth and color to really the perimeter of the face. And you can always, if you feel like, oh, maybe I added too much, or maybe it's not blending as well, you can always come right back with your sponge and do it right over top. Up next is blush. I'm going to be using Pinky Promise by Mented. And in terms of placement, I'm sort of aiming for that area right in between the concealer and the bronzer, like right where they meet. That's where I like to place my blush. I've noticed in recent years, people have started putting blush everywhere, honey. They're putting it on their nose, they're putting it on their forehead, they're putting it on their eyes. Go nuts, right? You have to experiment with what you like, but the placement I like is really kind of that where those products meet, where the concealer and the bronzer meet. And I do try to bring it up a bit and even under the eye a little bit. Okay, so next up is eye, and I will say for beginners, I strongly recommend picking up an eyeshadow pencil over a palette. A palette is just going to be more difficult to work with, and honestly, the Mented eyeshadow sticks are perfection, and they're so simple. Okay, so this is our shade Better Off Bronze. It's one of my go-tos, and literally, I just color all over my lid. All over my lid, and I do bring it up above the crease a bit. I love this shade because it's subtle, but that shimmer makes it look like you really are out here doing something, even when you're not doing that much of anything. So now really whatever eyeshadow brush you have on hand should work. We're just sort of like making sure we don't have any harsh lines. So I'm kind of smudging, I'm kind of circling, just to make sure it's not so harsh. All right, our final step is going to be lip. Now I did just go ahead and apply some mascara very quickly. The best thing you can do if you are a beginner for lip is to find a gloss shade that you look good in and that looks good on its own. Not something that you have to pair with a liner or a lipstick or anything else, because those steps, if you're combining products on your lips, the chances for them separating are higher. And then also when you go to reapply, you're having to reapply more steps. And if you're a beginner, that might not be something you're interested in. And I personally have yet to meet someone who doesn't look good in Mauve Over by Mented. Mine is on its last legs. I'm gonna really have to do some work here to get it out. But this color is just, I think, universally flattering. And of course you can build it up if you like even more color. This is about what I like. Okay, so that is your full face everyday makeup beginner tutorial. I hope you learned something. I hope you like what you see. If you want to purchase any of these products, I will have each of them named in the description, in the caption, and let me know if you have any questions.